Hello friends, welcome back. My name is Ben. I'm a garden educator here at the Edible Schoolyard, Kern County. Today, I'm really excited. We're going to be using the skills and the knowledge we learned from our last video with Sierra, where we talked about garden tools. We're going to use those tools to come out and from start to finish, prep an entire garden bed for planting. As you'll see, our steps will include weeding the bed, cultivating it and loosening the soil, amending it and adding some nutrients to our soil, and then finally raking it nice and flat and making it look pretty. I'm excited. Let's go ahead and begin. All right, so let's begin with our first step, which is weeding out our garden bed. It's really important that you do this because if you don't, eventually your weeds are going to grow big and they're going to start stealing away nutrients, water, sunlight, and maybe even space in your soil where you want your actual plants to grow. So this is very important to do, and plus I think it's kind of fun to get your hands dirty in there. So let's begin. I'm going to use our garden hoe and scrape away all the weeds that I can. Try to make sure you cut deep and get out their roots as well. And once you've cleared away all the weeds in your garden bed, make sure that you go through and pull them all out, and you can drop them off in your green waste bin. And then we're ready to move on to our next step. All right, next I want us to move directly on into edging and cultivating our bed. Edging means that we're going to define where the edges are so we don't waste planting outside our garden bed, and we don't waste compost by putting it on the walkway where it's not really needed. And then we're going to cultivate. And to cultivate means to lightly loosen up the soil. It's almost like a gentle tilling of your soil. And by doing that, you're making it easier to plant in, and you're also letting a whole bunch of oxygen inside that your roots of your plants need to breathe. So let's get started. For edging, I like to just grab a stick, and I'm just going to draw a shallow line of where I want my edges to be. And then I'm going to bring out my digging fork, and I'm going to use my digging fork to cultivate the edges and then cultivate all throughout the bed. So watch how I do this. I'm going to start where I put my line, and I'm just going to lightly loosen up. I just want to know where my edges are so I don't go outside of them. And next, when I want to cultivate everything in the center, it's really easy to do. So watch how I do this. I'm going to keep my back nice and straight so I'm not scrunching over and hurting myself. And how I'm going to do it is I'm going to put my digging fork in the soil at about a 45 diagonal angle. And then I'm going to use my foot. I'm going to push down, and then keeping my back nice and straight, I'm going to just lightly push down, and it lifts up soil. And I want you guys to repeat that everywhere on your bed where you're going to be planting. And so let's keep going on this, and then we'll be able to move on to our next step. Okay, so we just finished up cultivating. Our bed is nice and light and fluffy. It's getting great to plant in. But our next step is going to be amending the soil. And to amend means to improve or to fix it. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be improving or fixing the soil and making it a little bit better for life to grow in there. And so let's go ahead and get on into it. You're going to need your shovel, and I have some compost here that we made ourselves in the garden. And this step is easy. I just want you to spread out your amendments lightly over your whole garden bed and get it nice and covered. The reason we like compost is because it does many things for your soil. It helps it hold water, it gives nutrients, and it's also what we call organic matter. And so it'll slowly break down over time and keep giving tasty food to your plants and help them grow big. All right, we have our amendment laid on top of our bed. Next, what I want us to do is to shape it and lay it nice and flat. And by raking it and shaping it, you'll be mixing the compost into your soil, and you'll also be creating a nice flat plane to plant in. The reason you want a really nice flat bed is one, because you want your plants to grow evenly and all get the same amount of sunlight. And two, if you have one side of your bed that's sloping down, when you water, everything's going to move that way. And some of your plants are going to get too much, and then some of your plants can be really thirsty. So we want it to be nice and flat. And the tool we're going to be using today is our garden rake. And so let me show you how to use that garden rake. And again, pay attention to how straight I'm keeping my back. And so it's just a nice, easy push and pull. It's okay if this takes a few minutes. I find it kind of relaxing to do, but keep going at it like this until you have your edges built and you have a nice flat garden bed. So let's finish that up and then we'll be able to move on to our next step. Okay, so we followed all our steps of weeding, cultivating, amending, and raking our bed flat. So we are all set to plant. So let's do that. I have got some seeds that I want us to plant directly into the soil. And when you do that, it's called sowing seeds. So we're going to sow some radishes into where we just prepared our bed. Before you just start pulling seeds out and tossing them down, there's a couple things you have to do first. The first thing you do is you should read the back of your seed packet, because on the back, it'll tell you how deep you need to plant your seed, how much space it needs on each side, and also how many days before you should start seeing a little sprout come out of the ground. The only note I will say is for the seed spacing on each side, don't worry about that so much. You can always come back later and thin, which is where you pull out plants that are a little too close. But it's better to overplant than to underplant. So let's go ahead and get started planting our radishes. Okay, now we are ready to plant into our garden bed. And first, I want you guys to make a karate chop motion and keep that. And then I want you to go through the dirt and drag your karate chop hand across so you leave a nice ditch in the dirt. And we call that a furrow. It's just a row in the dirt. And so once you have your furrow, I want you to grab kind of a pinchful of seeds in your hand and just slowly and steadily move. And as you're moving, I want you to make kind of a seasoning motion, as if you're seasoning some tasty food. And by doing that, you'll steadily drop seeds. And don't worry if you drop too many in one spot, that is no big deal. Like I was saying earlier with the plant spacing, you can always come back later and pull out seeds that don't quite belong or are growing too close or kind of grew off to the side. And so once we do that, we need to tuck them in good and night. And we like to do this by doing the Pac-Man. So you have your Pac-Man and you're gonna go merp, 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 and it's like he's eating all the seeds, but he's covering them up. And we do this so our seeds are protected from animals and so that they've got a nice soil covering. And if you remember your days to germination on the back of your seed packet, we'll tell you about how many days until you should start to see things sprout up. And our last step, we're gonna water in our seeds because as you guys know, plants need water to grow. So I'm just gonna go over where I dug my furrow and planted my seeds and give them a good amount, but I'm not gonna flood them. And once you've watered them in, give them water every day just to make sure they stay nice and moist and so the soil is soft. And that is how you sow seeds. Thank you guys for joining me on that. All right, guys, up next, we are going to learn how to transplant or how to transfer an already growing plant into your garden bed. It's even simpler than sowing a seed into your garden bed. All you need is your pack of plants, choose some of the bigger ones, and you can either get a stick to poke in from the bottom, or if it's nice and loose, you can even just gently pinch and pull up your plant. This here is called the root ball, and of course this is your plant. I want you to gently rough up your root ball. It frees up the roots so they don't grow into each other. And then you're gonna get your garden trowel, and I want you to dig into the soil and then pull back towards you. And that's gonna open up the garden bed and give you a nice spot where you can drop off your transplant. I chose to plant some tomatoes. Tomatoes can be a little tricky because you want to plant those pretty far up the stem and they'll send roots out from the stem. So I am going to plant them a bit deeper than you would plant other things. Most things you would plant just in line with your root ball. So let's do that. I opened up my hole and I'm going to bunch up some soil around it and then lightly push down. Don't push down too hard or you're gonna squeeze the life out of those roots and they won't be able to help the plant grow. I'll show you guys that once more because I'm gonna keep going and put all my tomatoes in this row. So I'll do it one more time with my garden trowel. Dig into the earth, pull back a bit. Remember, I'm planting my tomatoes quite deep, but for most plants, you're not gonna go quite that deep. Right. And I'm gently patting the soil. And then of course, I want to water in my new transplants because they're gonna be thirsty, and this is gonna help the roots start exploring the garden bed. So I'll give them a pretty generous watering, and I'll do the same for my other. And that is how easy it is to transplant. And now is a great time for many things like peppers and eggplants and tomatoes, so I encourage you to pick up any of those and get them into your garden bed. All right, friends, thank you for joining me today on that pretty detailed video of learning how to prep your bed, then going into learning how to sow a seed directly into the soil, and then finally learn how to transplant an already grown plant into there. I had a ton of fun. I hope you guys learned something from this and can go out to your garden or your planter or whatever you have and start getting some plants growing. Thank you guys very much for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.